The cold light of the crystal chandelier pierced my eyes, making them ache. The air was filled with the scent of expensive lilies and the murmurs of hundreds of guests whispering to one another. I looked down at my pure white custom-made gown, my palms still sticky with that icy, viscous sensation, the temperature of blood draining from my body after I was pushed down the stairs and into a pool of my own blood in my past life. Sophia, marry me. Let me take care of you for the rest of your life. The familiar voice echoed in my ears. Ethan, dressed in a well-tailored black suit, knelt on one knee before me. He held a large diamond ring in his hand, his face adorned with the gentle smile I had been obsessed with for an entire decade in my previous life. Deep in his eyes, I clearly caught a glimpse of calculation and greed he was desperately trying to hide. In my past life, I had been completely deceived by this facade. We had known each other for 7 years, and I believed he was my salvation. I had used all my connections and resources to help him rise from an unknown newcomer to the position of department head. But when I lost my usefulness, when he realized I was no longer submissive, the tenderness in his eyes instantly turned to disgust and jealousy. When I discovered that he had been cheating on me behind my back and attempting to claim credit for a major project we had worked on together, erasing my name entirely, he even personally pushed me, 3 months pregnant, down the stairs at a hallway corner. It wasn't until I lay on a cold hospital bed, watching the ECG line go flat, that I understood he had hated me my entire life. He hated my excellence, my independence, and above all, the fact that he always needed me to stand on his own 2 feet. Sophia? What's wrong? Ethan's eyes flickered with a hint of displeasure when he saw my prolonged silence, though the perfect curve remained on his lips. Everyone is watching. The guests below the stage began to laugh kindly, and some even started to clap and cheer, say yes. Say yes. I looked at the man before me, a hypocrite wearing a mask of morality, and let out a slow breath. The suffocating pressure in my chest vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, clear anger. Having been given a second life, heaven had played the fairest joke on me, sending me back precisely to this night, the night that determined my fate. I did not shed tears of gratitude as I had in my past life, nor did I extend my right hand. In front of all the guests, I took a half step back. Ethan's smile froze on his face, and the hand holding the ring trembled slightly. Sophia, what are you doing? I looked down at him, my voice icy and resolute, leaving no room for doubt. Ethan, I refuse. The entire room fell into a sudden, dead silence. The cheers stopped abruptly, and all the cameras and eyes in that moment converged on us. Ethan's face flushed crimson. He stood up in a panic, attempting to take my hand. Sophia, don't joke like this. Today is our big day. If there's something you're unhappy about, we can talk about it when we get home. I flung his hand away with such force that he stumbled. I'm not joking with you, I said coldly. In front of nearly 100 colleagues and industry seniors on and off the stage, I reached into my bosom and pulled out a neatly folded document. It was the prenuptial agreement we had drafted a week ago, along with a termination notice for our jointly sponsored project. Under everyone's gaze, I held the edges of the agreement in both hands and tore it apart with a sharp rip. Rear-up, the crisp sound of tearing paper rang out sharply in the quiet hall. I didn't stop. I shredded the agreement into pieces, then flung them into the air. White scraps of paper fluttered down like winter snowflakes, landing on Ethan's polished, gleaming leather shoes. From this moment on, our engagement is cancelled. Every word I spoke clearly reached everyone's ears, I continued, and as for the project we were jointly responsible for, I am withdrawing from it entirely. Enjoy your solo act, Ethan. His eyes instantly bloodshot, he stared at me, his voice trembling with extreme anger and humiliation. Sophia, do you have any idea what you're doing? Do you know how many media and industry veterans are here today? What you're doing is destroying us both. No, I'm just saving myself. I leaned in, whispering only for us to hear, with a cold laugh. Ethan, I see through every dirty scheme in your mind. From today on, don't think you'll get a single benefit from me again. Without another glance, I turned and walked straight toward the backstage. Passing the seating area, I casually took a glass of red wine from a waiter's tray. Under everyone's gaze, I elegantly strode out of the banquet hall. Behind me, I heard Ethan's hysterical screams and the explosive murmurs of the guests, but I didn't look back once. Back at the apartment Ethan and I shared, I hesitated not a second before taking out the suitcase I had long prepared. On the nightstand sat a photo of us from last year, his smile bright and sunny, my eyes full of adoration. I picked up the frame, along with the cheap trinkets he had given me, and threw them all into the trash. Clothes, documents, personal files. I packed all my belongings in just half an hour. I had always paid the rent for this apartment, and even the expensive sound system in the living room was bought with my own salary. But I had no intention of having anything more to do with this place. As I carried my suitcase to the door, the sound of a lock turning came from the keyhole. Ethan burst in, flustered and exasperated. The pretense on his face had long vanished, replaced by rage and distortion. "Sophia! What the hell is wrong with you?" He slammed the door shut, blocking my way. "Do you know how humiliated I was in front of everyone today? Do you know what the company's leaders think of me? You're coming back with me right now to apologize to everyone, say it was all a misunderstanding." I stopped, looking coldly at the man who had pushed me into hell in my past life. "Move." I said only 2 short words. "I won't." Ethan shrieked hysterically. "Who do you think you are? Without me, could you have gotten this far in the company? Do you think you'll be better off without me? I'm telling you, Sophia, if you walk out that door today, you'll never be allowed back." I looked at his face, twisted with anger, and suddenly laughed, a cold laugh of complete liberation. "Ethan, you seem to have misunderstood something." I stepped forward, forcing him to meet my gaze. "It was never you who needed me. It was me who was always subsidizing you. Without me helping you with proposals, without me connecting you with clients, do you think your laughably limited abilities could have kept you in your current position? You're talking nonsense." Ethan, struck where it hurt, turned pale instantly. "You'll soon find out if I'm talking nonsense." I raised my hand and used my cane to push him firmly away from the door. "The lease on this apartment ends at the month's end, and I've already terminated it. The agent will come to clear it out tomorrow. As for your things, you'd better move them out tonight, or they'll be thrown onto the street." "You!" Ethan stared at me in shock, seemingly unable to believe that the decisive, ruthless woman before him was the same Sophia who had once been completely obedient to him. I gave him no chance to speak again, dragging my suitcase, and walked out the door without looking back. The morning sun streamed through the hotel's floor-to-ceiling windows as I sat at my computer, methodically organizing all the backup files on my personal work hard drive. My phone was vibrating frantically on the desk, the department director's name flashing on the screen. I answered and held it to my ear. "Sophia! What on earth is going on?" The director's anxious voice burst through instantly. "Ethan came to me first thing this morning, saying you suddenly unilaterally announced you're pulling out of the Guangxi project? Do you realize that the final presentation to the group's senior management is next week? This is a project you're both responsible for, and now you're backing out. What is he supposed to do?" I leaned back in my chair, my tone calm and unruffled. "Director, you're mistaken. This project was never both of ours. I independently completed the planning, logical framework, and core proposal. Only to accommodate his performance metrics did I add his name to the credits." There was a pause on the other end, clearly stunned by my bluntness. "Sophia, personal feelings shouldn't be brought into the workplace." "This isn't about personal feelings. It's about a work handover," I interrupted. "I've already submitted a department transfer request to HR. According to company policy, during the transfer review period, I have the right to reconfirm my intellectual property and business achievements. All original documents, mind maps, and revision logs for the Guangxi project are stored in my personal encrypted cloud drive. I've formally revoked Ethan's access privileges. You. The director inhaled sharply. Do you know what that means? Without those core data and logical frameworks, Ethan won't stand a chance at next week's presentation. That's his problem, not mine, I replied coldly before hanging up. Half an hour later, I arrived at the company building. The moment I stepped out of the elevator, I ran straight into Ethan. His eyes were rimmed with red, his complexion dark and haggard. Clearly, he hadn't slept all night. Seeing me, he grabbed my arm and forcefully dragged me into an empty break room. Sophia, what do you want? Ethan hissed in a low voice, his tone filled with hysterical anger. What do you mean by locking the Guangxi project access? Don't you know I need to send the proposal to the partners today? Unlock it immediately. I glanced down at his hand gripping my arm, my eyes cold as if looking at a stone. Let go. Startled by my gaze, Ethan instinctively released his grip, but he then straightened up, trying to use his usual sense of entitlement to dominate me. Sophia, don't go too far. Last night at the engagement party, you humiliated me in front of everyone. I was gracious enough not to hold it against you, thinking you were just throwing a little tantrum. But pulling this in our work, are you trying to ruin me? Ruin you? I chuckled softly, the sarcasm in my eyes unmistakable. Ethan, have you gotten so used to relying on me that you actually believe those achievements were somehow your doing? From the market research and framework building to the final implementation plan for the Guangxi project, which line did you write? Which slide did you design? Besides reading my scripts at meetings, what else can you even do? Ethan's face flushed instantly, turning the color of liver. My ruthless dismantling of his facade had struck a nerve. In my past life, to protect his ridiculous pride, I always willingly stepped back into the shadows, handing over all the spotlight and accolades to him. I thought it was love, but what I got in return was him complaining behind my back to colleagues about me being too dominant and not feminine enough, and even at the critical moment, stealing all my achievements and kicking me aside. So what if it's true? Ethan tore off his disguise, revealing his sinister face. We've been a team for all these years, and every project has been co-signed. Now you want to take it all for yourself? Not a chance. The company records are crystal clear, I'm the lead on this project, and you're just an assistant. If you don't hand over the permissions, I'll report you to HR and legal for withholding company assets. Go ahead and report, I raised an eyebrow, my expression calm and unfazed. I'll be waiting. Seeing my fearless demeanor, Ethan panicked completely. He took a deep, shivering breath, trying once again to grab my hand, his tone instantly switching to a hypocritical plea. Sophia. Please don't be like this. I'm begging you. Our 7 years together, are they worth less than a single project? The group leaders are coming next week for the presentation. If this project falls through, my position as manager is done. Just help me this once, just once, and I'll agree to whatever you say afterward, okay? The speed of his transformation was appalling. In my past life, I had been deceived time and again by this pitiful act of his, softening and letting him off, ultimately leading myself to ruin. I stepped back, creating distance, and pulled a printed handover agreement from my bag. This is a complete business separation agreement. I slapped the document onto his chest. I've already submitted evidence to the Academic and Business Integrity Committee, proving that the core original rights of the Guangxi project belong entirely to me. At the same time, I've applied to transfer the project entirely to Team 2. As for you, I paused, looking down at his ashen face. You'd better pray that during next week's defense, you can independently answer any technical question the review panel throws at you. You applied to transfer it? Ethan's hands trembled like leaves in the wind as he clutched the document. How dare you? Without me, how will you explain this to the company? Without you, the project will only be better. I ignored his hysterics and walked past him, leaving the break room. That afternoon, the company's internal announcement was officially issued. Because I had submitted complete timestamps, original code records, and logical framework demonstration videos, the academic and business committee unanimously approved my application. Ethan was stripped of all co-signing and lead responsibilities for the Guangxi project, which would be independently managed by me, and he was completely removed from the core team. The news sent shockwaves through the company. Colleagues who once regarded Ethan as a young talent and key contributor now looked at him with odd, sidelong glances. I stood at the end of the corridor, watching as Ethan slunk away, packing his things to move from the core office to a regular workstation. As he passed me, his eyes burned with hatred and malice. I took an elegant sip of coffee and gave him a faint smile. The air in the entire office area seemed to freeze. All the whispers and typing sounds stopped abruptly the moment I walked into the break room, and dozens of eyes, filled with scrutiny and gossip, fixed on me in unison. I calmly poured myself a glass of warm water and took an elegant sip. I knew what they were talking about. Last night, Ethan had been spreading rumors about me in the company's internal group chat and several private circles with industry peers. He painted himself as a tragic victim of heartless abandonment, claiming I had betrayed our 7-year relationship to climb the ladder. He even slandered me by accusing me of secretly conspiring with competitors, deliberately breaking off our engagement at a critical moment, and pulling the project results to retaliate against and suppress him. Some colleagues, unaware of the truth, now looked at me with cold detachment. Just then, the break room door was shoved open, and Ethan walked in, flanked by several colleagues who were close to him. He wore a slightly wrinkled shirt, his dark eye bags prominent, and his face bore a ridiculous expression of wronged resilience. "Sophia, since everyone is here, I think some things need to be cleared up today," Ethan raised his voice, making sure it would carry to the colleagues outside. "I know you're resentful because I refused to add your name to the project, but that's no reason to slander my reputation in the group chat or secretly report me to senior management behind my back. 7 years of relationship, are you really willing to stoop so low for a supervisor's position?" A subordinate following him chimed in, "Exactly, Sophia. Ethan has always treated you so well, everyone's seen it. Turning on him like this and locking up the business files, isn't that just too heartless?" All eyes focused on me again, and whispers rippled through the room. Many had clearly been deceived by Ethan's hypocritical facade. In my past life, he had used the same tactic of spreading rumors and smearing me to isolate me in the office as a cold-hearted shrew, subjecting me to scorn and exclusion. I set down my glass, its clink against the marble countertop sharp and clear. Looking at Ethan, I curled my lips into a faint, mocking arc. "Ethan, are you done acting?" My voice was not loud, yet it carried distinctly through the entire space. "You think getting ahead with these smears can hide your own disgusting behavior?" Ethan's face shifted, but he pressed on defiantly, "What smears?" "Which word I said isn't true. Clearly, it's you. If you want to clear things up in front of everyone, then let's go through everything, piece by piece, and set the record straight." I cut off his outburst, reaching into the folder I held to pull out a stack of printed color receipts and a hard drive. Without engaging in verbal back and forth, I walked directly to the projector connected to the lobby, plugged in the USB drive, and pressed play. "First, about your claim that I betrayed the relationship." I pointed to the chat logs and hotel bills flooding the large screen. "This is evidence of you, over the past 2 years, using business trips as an excuse to spend company funds on inappropriate relationships with several interns, along with a breakdown of your spending using the supplementary card I gave you. Shall I read out loud to everyone, page by page, those sickly sweet pet names?" On the screen, the explicit chat screenshots and incriminating bills were laid bare. The gathered colleagues erupted in shock, gasps rippling through the room. Ethan's face drained of color in an instant, and he scrambled forward in panic to yank out the USB drive. "Lies! This is all fabricated. You're violating my privacy." I sidestepped and coldly pushed him away. "Second, regarding your accusation that I secretly colluded with competitors and locked the project on my own. I switched to the next slide, which displayed an official verification report stamped by the Academic and Business Integrity Committee, along with a clear recording. This is a recording of your private attempt last week to sell the core algorithm and logical framework I independently developed under your name at a high price to the neighboring department. The recording played, and Ethan's familiar voice rang out with startling clarity. That project is entirely Sophia's work. She listens to me. As long as I sign it, this will be mine. Once I bring it over to your side, all the credit will be ours. The moment the recording ended, the pantry and the office area beyond fell into a deathly silence. The colleagues who had been backing Ethan suddenly distanced themselves as if they had stepped on a venomous snake, staring at him with shock and disgust. Ethan, not only are you two-timing and living off women, but you don't even have the most basic professional ethics, I said, each word piercing his heart, my gaze cutting through his trembling form like a blade. You think by pretending to be deeply affectionate and playing the victim every day, you can hide your petty, weak, and selfish nature? You hate that I'm better than you, hate that I can see through your incompetence at a glance, which is why you've gone to such lengths to drag me down. Ethan stood in the spotlight of the projector beam, his entire body shaking violently. All around him, the eyes of those present shifted from initial sympathy to contempt, disgust, and scorn. The murmurs of judgment fell upon him like hailstones. He was utterly ruined. Not only had he been exposed as a hypocritical, shameless scumbag in his personal life, but he had also been branded with the fatal labels of stealing achievements and professional misconduct in his career. You actually had so many backup plans. Ethan's teeth chattered as he stared fixedly at me, the venom and breakdown in his eyes nearly spilling over. It's not that I had backup plans, it's that every dirty deed you've done leaves a trace, I said, walking up to him and leaning down to look at his completely deflated face. Ethan, the persona you built at work has collapsed. From today on, everyone will see exactly what kind of person you are. That afternoon, Human Resources and Legal swiftly intervened in the investigation. Given the irrefutable evidence, the company directly issued a public reprimand for Ethan's severe breach of professional ethics, stripped him of all leadership roles, demoted him, and even added his misconduct to an industry blacklist. In the hallway, Ethan, like a rat crossing the street, hung his head and stuffed his personal belongings into a battered cardboard box under the disgusted gaze of his colleagues. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, coldly watching his slinking figure retreat. The moment I stepped out of the office building, the evening breeze, tinged with a hint of coolness, brushed against my face. I felt an unprecedented sense of relief and freshness. I had officially submitted my resignation. In this place that once confined and drained me, I had already reclaimed all the honors and innocence that belonged to me. Staying here any longer would only be a waste of time. My goal had been clear from the start: Harvard Business School. In my past life, to protect Ethan's ridiculous and sensitive ego, I gave up the opportunity to pursue advanced studies at a top institution, willingly staying on a mediocre platform to build a future with him. Yet he took my sacrifices for granted, and when I displayed exceptional talent, he resorted to suppression and belittlement to maintain his fragile sense of superiority. In this second life, I would never again pause my journey for anyone. For the next 3 months, I cut off all meaningless social connections, declined every invitation and gathering from peers. I rented a quiet apartment on the outskirts of the city and devoted all my energy to preparing for the GRE exam and writing my Harvard application essays. I rose at 5 in the morning and slept at midnight every day, practicing problems, refining my essays, and preparing for mock interviews. My life was incredibly disciplined and fulfilling. Without Ethan's emotional drain and the trivial, disgusting office politics, my thinking became exceptionally clear, and my learning efficiency soared to astonishing levels. Meanwhile, Ethan's life had completely sunk into a quagmire. Due to being blacklisted in the industry and demoted, he had become a pariah at the company, someone everyone avoided like the plague. All projects that were once his were stripped away, and he was marginalized into an insignificant clerical position, where he spent his days doing menial tasks like pasting receipts and organizing files. Yet he remained unwilling to give up. On a rainy evening, I had just finished my final online interview with the Harvard admissions officer. Carrying my laptop, I stepped out of the cafe and spotted Ethan waiting by the roadside. He was drenched, his hair disheveled, and his once crisp suit now hung wrinkled on his gaunt frame. He looked as haggard as a homeless person on the street. Sophia. Seeing me emerge, he lunged forward like a drowning man grasping at a straw, frantically trying to block my path. I stopped, looking at him coldly. I tugged my handbag back slightly, maintaining a safe distance. What are you doing here? Sophia, please. Help me, okay? Ethan's voice was hoarse, his eyes sunken, the malice in them replaced by helplessness and panic. The company is going to fire me for good. Without an industry recommendation letter, I won't be able to find any job in this field. If you just say a good word to HR and the director, tell them it was all a misunderstanding, I can stay. I looked at his groveling, pleading face, feeling only endless indifference. A misunderstanding? I raised an eyebrow, my tone flat and devoid of warmth. You left the evidence yourself. You did the dirty work yourself. What misunderstanding is there? Sophia. We've been together for 7 years. Ethan suddenly raised his voice, his eyes brimming with tears. He reached out with both hands, trying to grab my clothes. You can't be this cruel. I know I was wrong, I really do. I shouldn't have been jealous of you, shouldn't have schemed behind your back. If you're willing to come back, we can start over. I'll take you tomorrow to apologize to all our relatives and friends. I'll propose to you, and we'll get married right away, okay? Start over? Get married? Hearing these words from his lips, I felt nothing but biting irony and disgust. Ethan, you still haven't figured out one thing. I took a step forward, looking down at his face, which was full of unwillingness and pleading. I didn't do all this because of some petty squabble with you. I have truly seen through your malice and incompetence. Your so-called love is merely an attempt to bind me to your side as your free labor and stepping stone. My words cut like knives, piercing his heart. Do you think your pleading now is because you love me? No, you're just accustomed to sucking my blood. Now that I'm no longer here to manage everything for you, you realize you're nothing but a complete loser. Ethan trembled violently under my words, his face pale as paper. Sophia. Are you trying to drive me to my death? The one driving you to death isn't me, it's your own greed and incompetence. Just then, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I pulled it out, and the screen displayed a new email notification from Harvard University's official mailbox. Right in front of Ethan, I swiped the screen open. The email subject line was clear and blinding: official admission offer, Harvard University admission letter. Moreover, due to my outstanding logic demonstrated in the interview and essay, as well as my past independent project achievements, they had even offered me a full scholarship. I turned the phone screen toward Ethan's eyes, letting him clearly see those radiant lines of English words. See that? I smiled, my gaze clear and resolute. This is Harvard's admission letter. Ethan's eyes widened instantly, his pupils contracting sharply. He stared fixedly at the iconic Harvard shield and my English name, frozen in place as if struck by lightning. No. This is impossible. He muttered, his voice trembling violently. How? How could you get into Harvard? You've been with me for so many years, you're just someone who has always been suppressed by me, right? I pulled back the phone, looking down at the man who had collapsed completely on the ground. Ethan, from today onward, the gap between us is not just a difference in character, it's a class divide you could never cross in your lifetime. Rot slowly in your own quagmire, while I ascend to the heights that belong to me. I didn't look at him again, hailed a taxi, and drove off into the distance. The news of Harvard acceptance circulated in my original circle, and those who used to watch me make a scene or who followed Ethan to gloat at me suddenly changed their attitudes completely. Congratulations and fawning messages flooded my inbox, but I didn't reply to any of them. I was packing my bags and applying for visas at the fastest speed, tidying up all the trivial matters back home. And with Ethan, who left my shield and scapegoat role, my career path completely slid into a dead end. Losing my planning support, Ethan repeatedly made mistakes in his post-reassignment role. He couldn't even handle the most basic data summarization and spreadsheet organization, and he was repeatedly berated in department meetings by the new supervisor in front of everyone. His extreme insecurity and vanity made it impossible for him to accept the gap from business backbone to low-level lackey. In his haste to prove he didn't rely on me to stand on his own and to turn things around before the company fully pushed him out, Ethan set his sights on the department's new core supervisor, Chloe. Chloe was a formidable figure brought in from a foreign company with a high salary, holding a key project directly connected to industry giants. Ethan believed this was his only lifeline. He began trying to ingratiate himself with Chloe as he did with me back then. He used his remaining authority to secretly infiltrate the project group's shared database, stealing raw data and customer research reports that Chloe's team had spent months compiling. He thought he had done it flawlessly. Ethan slightly modified these data and pieced together a seemingly detailed new strategic plan, and, without the team's permission, submitted it directly to the company's top executives, hoping to take credit and supplant Chloe in one go. However, he had no idea that Chloe had already heard about my previous expose of Ethan and had been extremely vigilant about him all along. Just as Ethan stood in the high-level conference room, triumphant and spitting out his exclusive results, the door to the conference room was pushed open. Chloe, along with the company's legal team and external auditors, charged in directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry to interrupt the meeting." Chloe slid a thick stack of decisive evidence onto the conference table with a cold smile. "But I must reveal this workplace thief's shameless conduct on the spot." Ethan's speech stalled, his smile freezing instantly. "Chloe, what are you talking about?" "This plan is my independent thinking." "Independent thinking?" Chloe retorted mockingly, directly displaying the behind-the-scenes data retrieval logs and underlying code curves on the projector. "All the core data you presented had invisible tracking code set up by my team in the back-end. Even a deliberately left wrong decimal point in your page 23 data table matches exactly the data before I modified it yesterday at 3 o'clock. The senior executives' faces changed, and their gazes toward Ethan were filled with disgust and anger. Not only that. Chloe's eyes were as sharp as knives, stabbing Ethan directly. "I have already reported to the Industry Integrity Alliance. Ethan stole internal confidential data, forged project sources, and seriously violated non-compete and professional ethics. Our legal team will immediately initiate a lawsuit against him." Ethan's legs buckled and he collapsed heavily into a chair. "No. It's not like that. I was framed." He panicked and tried to justify himself, but no one would listen to another word. The top executives immediately announced that Ethan would be fired on the spot and would not receive any compensation, while legal accountability procedures were initiated. The news spread, and other companies in the industry quickly followed suit, directly blacklisting Ethan for life. No reputable organization would dare to hire such an industry pest, someone who lacked both competence and professional ethics. The day before I was scheduled to leave for the airport, I happened to run into Chloe at a coffee shop. "He's done for, Sophia," Chloe said with an elegant sip of her coffee, smiling at me. "No one will take him on again. He couldn't even afford the rent, got kicked out by his landlord, and I heard he's now crammed into a cheap apartment on the outskirts." I nodded calmly, my heart devoid of any stirring. This was all a path Ethan had chosen for himself. In his past life, he had climbed to the top by exploiting me and stealing my work. In this life, when he tried to use the same despicable tactics on others, all that awaited him was utter downfall. Leaving the coffee shop, I dragged my suitcase straight to the airport. In the first week after landing in Boston, the sea of red maples on the Harvard campus dazzled me. I dressed in a sharp suit and moved between libraries and study rooms, immersing myself wholly in this world-class academic and social circle. I thought everything in my homeland had fallen far behind me, but Ethan's narrow-mindedness and malice proved more stubborn than I imagined. After being fired from the company, a full industry-wide ban, and legal action, Ethan, having nothing left, completely snapped. He cannot bear that I am ascending while stepping on his bloodline, nor can he tolerate the stark contrast of his own struggles in the mud while I shine at Harvard. Extreme imbalance pushed him toward the thought of destroying me altogether. He spent his last savings and anonymously posted a large number of fabricated posts on several well-known academic and study abroad forums abroad. He disguised himself as an insider, claiming that I had obtained others' results through improper means during my time in the country, and even accusing my Harvard application essays and letters of recommendation of serious academic fraud and resume embellishment. To bolster his credibility, he even used my banner and privately sent hundreds of anonymous reports to the Harvard Business School Admissions Office and the College Academic Committee, attaching his forged evidence chain. These posts quickly sparked small-scale discussions among international student communities at home and abroad. My roommate, holding a phone, rushed over in worry, asking, "Sophia, have you seen the forums? Someone is malignantly smearing you, even sending the letters to the college mailbox. If the college launches an investigation, the process will be very tedious and could affect your scholarship and course selection." I looked at those familiar and venomous words on the screen and broke into a cold, inward laugh. In a previous life, Ethan was like this. Once he found he could not control me, he would use the dirtiest rumors to destroy my reputation. Did he think the same tricks would work at Harvard? He underestimated me, and overestimated his own measly disguise skills. Actually, even before leaving the country, I had anticipated that with Ethan's sinister and paranoid personality, he would not stop willingly. Since the day I refused his marriage proposal, I had notarized all my past project manuscripts, timestamp records, email exchanges, and references, and stored them in an immutable blockchain cloud database. He thought he was in the dark while I was in the light. Little did he know that I had already laid a trap of eternal damnation for him. I did not immediately ask people to clarify on the forum, nor did I rush to speak out to the college. On the contrary, I behaved as if I knew nothing, allowing the online public opinion to ferment for another 3 days. During these 3 days, the self-satisfied Ethan completely lowered his guard. He kept replying on the forum with multiple accounts, even to prove his authority, and in one heated argument with a netizen, he accidentally disclosed a timestamp detail of the project that only he and I had access to. He thought he was pushing me into the abyss, but he did not realize that every post he published, every IP address, and every login record was being captured in real time and locked by a third-party professional online forensics firm I had commissioned. Moreover, I deliberately leaked a false message through a common friend circle in the country, stating that I was emotionally unstable due to the reports and was considering taking leave from the school to return home to clarify things. This message completely ignited Ethan's arrogance. He thought I was afraid, that he had finally found my Achilles heel. To deliver a mortal blow, he posted one last so-called ultimate ironclad proof on the forum and arrogantly left his real email address at the end of the post, claiming he would be available for Harvard officials' inquiries at any time. He thought he had his net closed. Actually, he simply placed his neck right into the gallows I had tailor-made for him. Within 2 hours after his post, I walked into the office of the Harvard Business School Academic Integrity Committee chairman with all the compiled IP tracking reports, notarized timestamp certificates, and evidence linking Ethan's personal accounts. "Sophia, we received a report against you, but we trust the evidence more," the chairman said, looking at me sternly. I elegantly opened my laptop and presented the complete chain of evidence along with the official notice of Ethan's dismissal in China for stealing confidential information. "Mr. Chairman, this is not an academic dispute. It is a cross-border, premeditated malicious defamation and false accusation," I said clearly and firmly. "I have completed all evidence preservation, and I have already notified my legal team." On this drizzly morning, a light Boston rain fell upon the stately red brick buildings of Harvard Law School, leaving a cold, glistening sheen on the ground. Dressed in a well-tailored black suit, my long hair neatly pinned back, and gripping a heavy briefcase, I ascended the courthouse steps with a steady stride. Today marked the official opening of this transnational case involving defamation, infringement, and malicious false accusations. The courtroom was solemn and silent. The public gallery was filled with industry media who had caught wind of the news, Harvard alumni, and a few law school professors who had come specifically to follow the case. Meanwhile, in the defendant's seat sat the lifeless Ethan. In just a few short months, he seemed to have withered significantly. The suit he once wore with pride now hung loosely on his frame. His eyes were bloodshot, sunken deep into their sockets, and his chin was covered in unkempt stubble. He sat in the defendant's chair, his hands constantly rubbing his knees, radiating an air of extreme anxiety and despair. The moment he saw me stride confidently into the courtroom, my gaze unreservedly cold and condescending, his body shuddered violently, and he desperately avoided my eyes. The trial officially began. The judge struck the gavel, its icy sound echoing through the courtroom. Ethan's defense lawyer attempted one last struggle, standing at the podium and arguing passionately, "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Ethan, made those statements online merely due to misunderstandings arising from past emotional entanglements and collaborative details. He had no malicious intent to defame, and his actions did not cause irreversible substantial harm to the plaintiff." Misunderstanding? No malicious intent? My lead attorney scoffed, then rose gracefully to interrupt the performance. "Your Honor, my client requests to present core evidence labeled A01 through A15. A large screen slowly descended, and high-definition projections displayed each piece of evidence for all to see. The first set of evidence was a top-tier data analysis report prepared by a digital forensics expert. The screen clearly mapped Ethan's precise trajectory over the past month, showing how he had used multiple anonymous accounts and layered proxy IPs to send hundreds of false complaint letters. Every send time, every login location, even the venomous curses he typed in his manic late-night states, were locked down without onto his personal devices. The second set of evidence was a complete timestamp comparison conducted by an authoritative domestic notarization agency. The large screen displayed a line-by-line comparison between the original handwritten drafts and code logs of my independent projects and Ethan's so-called complaint materials. The results showed that the evidence Ethan had submitted to Harvard was nothing more than scrap paper cobbled together from obsolete drafts he had left over from his time at the company, maliciously edited and forged with fake stamps. Finally, my lawyer played a recording. It was a phone call Ethan had made to a mutual friend in China on the night he believed I was being forced to a breakdown. In the recording, Ethan's vicious and arrogant voice resounded throughout the courtroom. "So what if it's Harvard? So what if they're high and mighty? As long as I send those complaint letters and muddy the waters, Harvard will have to expel her to protect their reputation. What I can't have, I'll destroy with my own hands. I want her to be stuck in the gutter, just like me, never to be reborn." The moment the recording finished, the entire courtroom erupted. The public gallery burst into murmurs of suppressed disgust and fury. Industry journalists scribbled frantically, and camera flashes flickered incessantly. Ethan's face twitched like ash in that instant. He glared at the recording device, his hands gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white and trembling from the force. He never imagined that the heartfelt words he had spoken out of arrogance would become the deadliest sword hanging over his head. "Defense attorney for the defendant, do you have anything to add?" The judge's voice was cold as frost. The opposing lawyer, looking at the impeccable ironclad evidence on the screen and the recording that completely exposed the subjective malice, sighed in despair and lowered his head. No objections from our side. I stood up and walked to the plaintiff's podium. I looked at Ethan, who was as pathetic as a dead dog, and my voice was calm yet powerful, resounding through the courtroom like a thunderclap. "Your Honor, the defendant Ethan not only subjected me to psychological manipulation and theft of my work over a period of many years, but also, after I refused to be controlled by him any longer, out of extreme jealousy and resentment, he resorted to forging public documents, malicious false accusations, and cyberbullying in an attempt to destroy my academic career and personal dignity. He thought that by hiding in the shadows of anonymity, he could drag me into the mud with rumors and slander. But he forgot that the law and the truth will never yield to the schemes of the wicked. I request the court to impose the harshest legal penalties on the defendant, not only requiring him to pay substantial compensation for reputational damage but also to pursue criminal charges for his suspected forgery of notarized documents, malicious false accusations, and public defamation. The judge nodded, his expression grave, and struck the gavel. The court will recess for 30 minutes for deliberation before delivering the final verdict. During the recess, the hallway outside the courtroom was packed with people. Under the escort of the bailiffs, Ethan passed by me. He suddenly broke free, his eyes red with rage, and lunged toward me, but he was instantly pinned to the ground by my bodyguards and the bailiffs. Sophia! Sophia! I was wrong, I was really wrong. He lay on the cold floor, tears and snot mixing together, his voice filled with endless panic and despair. Please withdraw the lawsuit, okay? Tell the judge we were just a couple having a lover's quarrel. If I'm found guilty of a criminal offense, I'll be completely ruined. My life will be utterly destroyed. I lowered my head and looked down at this man, groveling at my feet like a dog. Ethan, when you pushed me down the stairs in my past life, when Yuli posted reports online trying to destroy me, did you ever think that I would be destroyed by you too? I said coldly, in a voice only the two of us could hear. All the despair you feel today is the evil fruit you planted yourself. No! Sophia! Please! For the sake of our 7 years together. He screamed hysterically, kowtowing without any dignity. 7 years of feelings have long since been fed to the dogs by your hypocrisy and pettiness, I said coldly, lifting my foot to avoid his filthy hands reaching out for me. Half an hour later, the court reconvened. The judge stood and delivered the final verdict. This court rules, the charges of malicious defamation, infringement of the plaintiff's right to reputation, and forgery of evidence against the defendant Ethan are all proven. The defendant Ethan is ordered to publicly issue a written apology to the plaintiff Sophia, and to pay substantial compensation for reputational and economic losses. Furthermore, as his actions constitute serious crimes of malicious false accusation and forgery of notarized documents, he is hereby transferred to the judicial authorities and sentenced to 3 years in prison, effective immediately. The sound of the gavel falling sealed Ethan's fate. The moment Ethan heard the words effective immediately, his entire body seemed to collapse, as if his spine had been ripped out. His eyes bulged, and he slumped to the ground, the foul smell of incontinence faintly emanating from him. The bailiffs dragged Ethan, who was crying his heart out and racked with remorse, out of the courtroom like a dead dog. I straightened my suit, and amidst the applause from the entire courtroom and the flashing lights of the media, I walked gracefully out of the courtroom doors. The glass of the prison visitation room separated two entirely different worlds. The clock on the wall ticked audibly, and the air was filled with the acrid scent of disinfectant mingled with mold. I sat on a specially designed metal chair, wearing a custom cashmere coat from Harvard Business School, my fingertips folded elegantly and calmly over my knees. Before long, the heavy iron door was pushed open with a loud clank. Ethan was escorted in by 2 prison guards. He wore a dull yellow prison uniform, his head shaved to a cold buzz cut, and his once proud, upright posture now severely hunched. He had lost a full 30 pounds. His eyes were sunken deep into their sockets, surrounded by dark, bruise-like circles, and the exposed skin on his wrists bore red marks left by the cold handcuffs. In just a few short months of imprisonment, this once arrogant man had been utterly broken. When he sat down opposite me and saw me through the thick bulletproof glass, his shoulders convulsed violently. I didn't speak, just watched him quietly, my gaze clear and indifferent, as if observing an inanimate object. Ethan trembled as he picked up the wall-mounted phone receiver and held it to his ear. I slowly raised my own receiver. Sophia. His voice was hoarse, like 2 rough sandpapers scraping together, tinged with a desperate whimper. You came to see me. You finally came to see me. I'm not here to see you, I said calmly, my tone flat. I'm here to retrieve the last batch of notarized documents I left with you, and to deliver a supplementary notice of judgment. At the word judgment, Ethan's body jolted, and fear surged once more into his eyes. Sophia. I beg you. Please apply for medical parole for me, or a sentence reduction. Ethan pressed against the glass, tears and snot streaming down his face instantly, his voice filled with endless pleading and humility. This place is absolutely not fit for human habitation. They beat me, steal my food, make me scrub the toilets. I have nightmares every night. I really can't take it anymore. You deserve all of it, Ethan, I said coldly, looking at him. When you tried to spread rumors online and destroy my academic career with false reports, you should have anticipated this day. Ethan stared at my cold face, suddenly clutching the receiver like a madman, his eyes bulging, his voice turning hysterical. Why? Sophia, tell me why? We were together for 7 years. Even if I made a mistake, even if I was momentarily jealous and confused, why are you so ruthless to me? You tore up our engagement, took the project, drove me to expulsion, and even sent me to prison. It's as if you foresaw everything. Why have you hated me so deeply since the day of the proposal? He stared at me intently, his eyes filled with confusion, unwillingness, and a desperation on the verge of collapse. This was the question he had pondered every second of every day during his months in prison. He couldn't understand why the Sophia who once obeyed him completely, willing to silently devote herself behind his back, had transformed overnight into a calculating and ruthless avenging goddess. I looked at his pain-twisted face and leaned slightly closer to the glass. A curve of extreme coldness and irony formed at the corner of my mouth, and in a voice only the two of us could hear, I slowly said, Ethan, do you want to know why? Ethan held his breath, his pupils contracting sharply, his ear pressed tightly against the receiver. Because. My gaze cut through his soul like a blade. In my previous life, when I was 3 months pregnant, it was also at that corridor corner that you personally pushed me down the stairs. Boom, like a sudden thunderclap from the heavens, Ethan's mind went blank in an instant. You. What are you saying? He stammered, teeth chattering, frozen in place, his eyes filled with extreme absurdity and disbelief. In my past life, I helped you rise from a lowly clerk to a manager's position, but you envied my talent and hated me for being better than you. You played both sides, stole my achievements, and even after I discovered the truth, you pushed me down the stairs to silence me, watching me and our child bleed to death. My words were like iron, carrying the coldness and menace of the underworld. Ethan, heaven gave me a second chance. From the moment I opened my eyes again, standing at the proposal scene, I swore to make you repay everything you owed me from your past and present life, with interest. Ethan was completely stunned. Fragments of his past life's memories collided violently with the cruel reality of his present life in his mind. He looked into my eyes, where a hatred that had accumulated over 2 lifetimes and an absolute, towering disdain finally made him understand everything. There were no misunderstandings, no petty tantrums, no coincidences. From the very second he knelt down to propose again, he had already stepped into a hell of revenge tailor-made just for him. No. No. This isn't true. This can't be. Ethan trembled as he hung up the phone, completely overwhelmed by a massive mental breakdown and despair. A surge of regret and panic engulfed him like a tsunami. He regretted it. He regretted his narrow-mindedness, his greed, and most of all, provoking a woman he should have never crossed in both his past and present lives. If he hadn't harbored such vile thoughts, if he had stayed grounded, he could have had a brilliant wife and a bright future. But now, not only had he lost everything, he had also personally condemned himself to an abyss of no return. Stay behind these iron bars and repent for your past and present lives. I gracefully hung up the phone and slowly stood up. Sophia! Sophia! Don't go! I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Ah. Behind me, Ethan's hysterical wailing and desperate screams echoed as he frantically banged his head against the bulletproof glass, only to be pinned down by several prison guards, struggling like a completely hopeless mad dog. I didn't look back at him again. Autumn in Boston arrived with startling swiftness. Along the Charles River, the maple trees blazed with golden and deep crimson hues, while crisp, cold breezes swept past the ancient buildings of Harvard Business School, carrying away all worldly noise. The moment I stepped out of the prison administration building, I formally sealed away every past grudge and grievance from back home. During my time at Harvard, free from the drain of hypocritical relationships and the underhanded schemes of despicable tactics, my talents and ambitions were unleashed to their fullest potential. Pouring all my energy into academic research and top-tier business case analyses, I quickly distinguished myself in the fiercely competitive business school, leveraging my exceptional logical insight and solid practical experience. In just 1 year of enrollment, I published 2 landmark papers as the lead author in internationally renowned business journals, proposing an entirely new data-driven decision-making model. My academic mentor, a towering figure with supreme prestige in both Wall Street and academia, spoke highly of me, not only making an exception to invite me into his core research group but also personally taking me to major capital summits and international academic forums. Here, I encountered the true elite circle at the pinnacle of the pyramid. I sat down with CEOs of Fortune Global 500 companies to discuss industry trends and dined with top venture capitalists to strategize future market layouts. Every speech, every presentation, I displayed unparalleled professionalism and unshakable composure. I was no longer the woman who once hid behind Ethan, deliberately suppressing her own brilliance to protect his pride. I was Sophia, a top-tier elite whose sheer talent commanded the attention of the entire business arena. My name frequently appeared in international financial media, hailed as the most promising business strategist of the new generation. Meanwhile, far away in prison, Ethan's life had plummeted into an abyss of utter despair. Prison life during his sentence was extremely harsh. As a convict imprisoned for false accusation and professional crime, he occupied the very bottom of the prison hierarchy. Gone were the once glamorous shirts and titles. Every day, he faced grueling manual labor and endured exclusion and bullying from fellow inmates. In the prison common room, an old color television played international news and financial channels at scheduled times. That afternoon, just after finishing labor, covered in grime and bruises, Ethan trudged heavily to a corner of the common room. His gaze drifted to the TV screen, and instantly, as if struck by lightning, he froze in place. The news broadcast was showing the Global Top Business Leaders Summit held in New York. The camera zoomed in under dazzling spotlights. I stood elegantly at the center of the podium in a perfectly tailored pure white haute couture gown, delivering a keynote speech on future market structures in fluent, polished English. Before me sat hundreds of the world's leading entrepreneurs and dignitaries. The moment my speech concluded, the hall erupted into thunderous and sustained applause. Scrolling across the bottom of the screen were the words, Distinguished Scholar of Harvard Business School, Chief Advisor of Top Projects, Sophia. On screen, I shone with brilliant confidence, my gaze radiating an aura of dominion and wisdom over the world. Ethan stared fixedly at the screen, his eyes bulging, his parched lips trembling violently. He watched the woman who had once bowed to him, who had once yielded to all his demands, now standing at an absolute height he could never reach even in his wildest dreams. And here he was, clad in a filthy prison uniform, emanating a musty odor, confined behind cold, damp iron bars. A crushing, suffocating sense of disparity washed over him in an instant. Around him, a fellow inmate clapped his shoulder and sneered, "Hey, what are you watching? That woman stands at the pinnacle of the world, a level far beyond the likes of you scum." The mocking laughter of the prisoners echoed in his ears as Ethan's legs finally buckled under the weight of his body, and he collapsed with a heavy thud onto the cold concrete floor. Tears of remorse mixed with the grime on his face streamed down as his heart felt as though it were being crushed by an invisible hand, the pain so intense it made him curl into a ball. 3 years of sentence finally came to an end amid endless remorse and torment. As the heavy iron doors slowly closed behind him, Ethan stood under the blinding sun, instinctively shielding his eyes. 3 years of prison life had taken everything from him: health, dignity, the youthful years he should have had, and the once gleaming character he possessed. His hair was thinning and gray, his back stooped like a fading old man, and his eyes were filled with the dullness and timidity that come from long-term life at the bottom of society. When he stepped out of prison, he had nothing. The domestic blacklist of his peers left him unable to find any work in his former circle. Not even a basic clerical position would survive a background check. Desperate, Ethan sold his last remaining possessions back home, used his residual social connections, and forged a false resume erasing his prison experience, holding a short-term visa and gambling everything to go abroad. He fantasized about starting anew on this unfamiliar land, and deep in his dim heart, there remained a glimmer of luck that even he did not dare to admit. He had heard that Boston, where Harvard Business School is located, was gathering a large number of top institutions in global capital, and he wanted to seek opportunities abroad, even if it meant seeing me again, even if it meant obtaining a little morsel on this land nearest to him. After sending hundreds of resumes, he finally received an interview invitation from a top global fund in Boston. Although it was only a low-level temporary research assistant position, it was the only plank of hope he had managed to grasp from the mud. On the day of the interview, Ethan wore a cheap suit bought from a second-hand market, carefully combing his sparse hair with hair oil, stepping into the skyscraper in Boston's financial district with extreme nervousness and anticipation. Inside the building, the luxurious marble floors and panoramic windows made him feel small and terrified with every step. He was guided into an exceedingly spacious high-level interview conference room overlooking the city. Across the long table sat three formidable senior reviewers. In the center of the head seat sat a woman in a dark blue high-end tailored suit, with an elegant, ethereal aura. Ethan raised his head, and the moment he saw the woman in the center, the entire person felt struck by lightning. The resume in his hands dropped to the floor with a thud. It was Sophia. 3 years had passed, and I was no longer the naive Harvard freshman I once was, but the youngest partner and chief reviewer of the Global Fund, sitting high above him, calm and with absolute authority. Please sit, Mr. Ethan. My voice rang out in the quiet conference room, crisp and cold, with no fluctuation. Ethan sat on the edge of his chair trembling, not daring to look into my eyes. Your resume seems extensive, but in recounting the past 3 years, there appears to be a significant logical gap. I perused the documents in my hand, my slender fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. I was doing private closed-door research during those years. Ethan stammered, trying to defend himself, his voice as faint as a mosquito. I smiled gently, a smile that carried unmasked demeaning humor and chilling menace. Mr. Ethan, the core foundation of the business world is morality and integrity. I slowly closed the resume and looked down at him. You falsified your employment timeline in your resume, concealed your criminal record with judicial authorities, and continued to choose dishonesty during our questioning just now. According to the Global Business Fund's risk control standards, you not only failed to meet the requirements for this position but will also be placed on our cooperative network's permanent blacklist. My tone was extremely professional, completely objective, devoid of even a trace of personal emotion. It was this absolute businesslike demeanor, this professional scrutiny that regarded him as nothing more than a roadside ant, that constituted the most thorough crushing. In his eyes, the only chance to turn his fate around was, in my view, nothing more than a mere dismissal following standard procedure. He no longer even qualified as my opponent. Sophia. No, Your Honor, the evaluator. Ethan's eyes instantly reddened, and in front of the other two foreign examiners, he actually slumped down from his chair with a thud, collapsing to his knees on the ground. Please. Give me a way out. I really have nowhere else to go. The surrounding examiners showed expressions of shock and disgust. I didn't even stand up. I simply pressed the intercom phone on the desk. Security, please escort this non-compliant interviewee out. 2 tall security personnel quickly pushed the door open and dragged the crying, disheveled Ethan out of the conference room like a bag of trash. Ethan's desperate howls echoed in the corridor but soon vanished beyond the heavy soundproof door. I reopened the next candidate's file and calmly continued my work. Ethan, who had nowhere left to turn, completely lost his last illusion. He had bashed his head against foreign legal and business rules, and even his remaining dignity had been crushed to dust. He would forever languish in the dark corners at the very bottom, while I had long crossed that sea and stood on higher clouds.